Welcome to Regeneration, a podcast about reimagining Jewish customs in a modern world. I'm Debs Weinberg.
And I'm Eileen Levinson. And we're here to help families, friends, and chosen families revive customs with authenticity, creativity, and joy.
From Shabbat candles to everyday blessings, discover how you can weave new and old practices together across the generations to bring the people you love closer. Shabbat Shalom, Eileen.
Shabbat Shalom, Debs. For those of you who have been listening to this podcast over our first several episodes, you might have heard us refer to a term called the building block of ritual, or the ritual toolkit. And that's something that Vanessa Oakes has written about so beautifully. And it's a concept that we use at Recustom, thinking about what are all the pieces that you put together from your Jewish experiences, your Jewish toolkit, whether that is certain blessings or melodies or, even garments like the talis. And what are the things from your just secular personal life, whether that's music or pop songs that you like, art that you find inspirational. At Recustom, we love to give templates for rituals using the basic building blocks for the recipe that you could put together with your modern inspiration to make a Jewish moment. So that recipe might come from our Jewish history and liturgy and traditions that we might have grown up in. And some of it comes from just design thinking and human-centered design to help us adapt that tradition to where we are now. And we think about how to bring in the senses, all of the senses, to evoke memory and how to locate ourselves in the specificity of what we're living in and bring in all those beautiful idiosyncrasies that make us individuals.
Eileen, I love that because I think that while this podcast is about ritual, it's not prescriptive about how to be Jewish or how to do Jewish. It's really about action and intention and responsibility and gratitude and finding joy. And it's also about making meaning of events that transform every day into making every day count.
Have you ever had an experience where somebody just said, get out of your head? Get out of your own way. You're overthinking it. Just dive in.
I tend to just dive in. So I think that Judaism has meant something different to me depending on how old I was and what stage of life I was going through. So in college, I was definitely thinking much more about the meaning of what I was doing. Now that I'm a grandparent, you have little kids and you want to make it a joyful experience for them, and you really have to get out of your head. So you need to be thinking about, how a young child is experiencing Judaism. And that's, I think, what grandparents need to bring to this is, what are my grandkids experiencing? What will they think about 40 years from now when they're looking back and they're thinking about Shabbat or they're thinking about Passover Seder with their family? What are the memories that they're going to be holding on to? That's what we should be thinking about as grandparents and parents now.
Debs, I love hearing about your journey from motherhood to grandparenting. And what I love about your work is that you're bringing a lot of fresh energy to the act of grandparenting. I think I maybe had an image of what a grandparent was 30 years ago or when I was growing up. And particularly when you hear about Jewish grandparenting, we think about just old stereotypes. Name any of them. And here you are coming in with great style, great personality, and a lot of creativity that you've brought to your family. And you're reviving practices for your peers and other grandparents that want to help their children and their grandchildren and their extended family feel included. So I think, Debs, had you thought about what people expected of Jewish grandparents and the stereotypes, if you were a person who got stuck in your head, you wouldn't be doing all the really creative and inspiring things that you're doing now. And so I really take inspiration from you to just keep doing the work and keep doing what inspires us.
Yeah, our guest today is Rabbi Lisa Rubin, whose job is to help both Jews and those who are Jewish adjacent and Jewish curious come to learn about Jewish life, which, of course, includes ritual. Rabbi Lisa Rubin is the director for the Center for Exploring Judaism at Central Synagogue in Manhattan. She has an amazing team that she works with, and I hope that people get to know her not only through our podcast, but will visit Central Synagogue in Manhattan if they're there. Rabbi Rubin points out that rituals have varying degrees of complication. It's both complex and also needs to be also at a comfort level. So the more complex the ritual, the harder it is if you're new to Judaism. But ritual is very much a part of academics, but it's also the vehicle that moves identity from the academic into the heart. And I think Lisa is all about the heart.
Debs, it's so wonderful to be here and see you again. I love meeting other directors who are passionate about their area and their programs. So thank you and thank Eileen for having me. My experience growing up, I think, was very typical Reform Judaism. I grew up in Sandy Springs, Georgia, 2 Jewish parents, 4 Jewish grandparents. On my mother's side, my grandparents were from Europe. My grandfather specifically was a survivor of the times of Hitler, and he always felt incredibly grateful to have made it to this country. And so my Jewish influence from my European grandparents was always just one of gratitude, how lucky we are to live in a place where we can be openly Jewish, to live in a place where we didn't have to fear at all. And they weren't highly observant Jews, but they were very Zionistic, very interested in what was happening in Israel, because to them, this was, the safety blanket. But they came and spent all the holidays at my home, which my parents always hosted. I have very fond memories of my mom putting the Seder together and my dad leading it, and my mom setting up the menorah, and my dad lighting all the candles. And my American grandparents were a part of this as well. They were several generations American, but originally from Europe and Russia. So we're all Ashkenazic Jews. And my parents gave me a beautiful Jewish experience. We didn't have Shabbat every week, but we never missed the major holidays. And I have to credit my parents also with teaching me to love books and love study and love current events and love community service, all the things that I would later associate with Judaism. But to us, it was a very organic part of the way I grew up. And they gave me 2 incredible gifts in terms of experiences that would shape my early memory. One, they started sending me to a Jewish sleepaway camp when I was 7 years old, and that was so formative. And 2, they sent me to a semester of high school in Israel. And so, I point to those 2 experiences as piercings in an otherwise quiet, normal, Reform Jewish life. So I grew up with such a positive identity, Debs. I was really lucky.
So, Rabbi Rubin, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Center for Exploring Judaism and your role there. I know that many people are coming in to explore Judaism, and many people end up deciding to convert to Judaism. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you do, and also if you can tell us a little bit more about how rituals play a part in your teaching.
I think of the work that I do as the work of welcoming. When I started the Center for Exploring Judaism with Central's leadership and with their blessing, it was to fill a gap in the marketplace I felt existed in New York City of a place where people could come learn about Judaism with no judgment, no agenda on our part, that they join the synagogue or they get married at the synagogue or they pledge their firstborn to the nursery school. I just dreamt of a place where Jews and non-Jews could come and learn about Jewish life. And of course, ritual is a very rich part of our curriculum. So we have classes and we have holiday celebrations and we have counseling. And we have experiences that help people both learn and try on for size what they're learning. We have no agenda whether someone converts or not. That being said, it has become, over these 16 years, the largest conversion program of its kind anywhere in the world. And it's not because our philosophy is to proselytize and convert people. It's because our philosophy is to be, as the ancient rabbis were, wide open to people who might be interested in joining us. And so we teach with great integrity and compassion and rigor. And Judaism sells itself. I know I'm a little biased, but I do feel that Judaism, when packaged correctly, taught at the right level, can be a very transformative experience for an individual or a couple. And the role of ritual, because you asked, really, there's two parts to this. The first is that ritual is just inextricably linked to the academics when someone wants to learn about Judaism, because ritual is formative. It helps people practice Judaism, maybe become Jewish through an embodied experience of what they're learning. And part of learning is practicing. So we don't feel that learning is enough, and we don't feel like practicing is enough. We feel like they have to go together and be linked together. So a good way to think about it is that ritual moves identity from the intellect and academic into a lived experience. More so, we find if someone is having challenges or trouble with the beliefs of Judaism, we find that practicing and going through rituals will often precede belief. So one can lead to the other, and it's not always that study leads to practice. It might be that practice leads to study and belief. Ritual is so important for people coming into the Jewish community because it creates a belonging before there's any sort of certainty or commitment on the part of someone who might be considering conversion. So the soundbite that I'm going to give you is where ritual is where Jewish identity moves from the head into the hands and the heart. And that's a really important part of our Jewish education. So that's part one of how ritual is part of this process. Part two is that one of the final steps of conversion is a very powerful ritual itself, and that's immersion in the mikvah. It is profoundly moving. It's more of a decorative ritual where somebody is, immersed in something very beautiful, and there's no calling in or phoning in that ritual. Once you are in the mikvah, you understand there's some very profound transformations happening.
Do you find that working with people that they feel a sense of imposter syndrome, kind of as it relates to Jewish identity, that they begin to, again, through the welcoming process and through exploration of Judaism, that people begin to feel more comfortable?
Yes, I think, imposter syndrome in Jewish identity is absolutely there. I can validate that. It's really one of two major concerns of everyone considering conversion. Imposter syndrome, Debs, I think is universal. I don't think it's limited to converts, but converts especially suffer from it because they are treated with a double standard. Look at all they have to learn compared to people who are born Jews. How many potential converts say to me, but, my wife doesn't know anything about this and she's still Jewish. If a born Jew doesn't know the blessings, okay, we write them off. We say, oh, they're a marginal Jew. Maybe they didn't pay attention in Hebrew school. But if someone is just converted to Judaism and doesn't know the blessing, well, maybe they didn't study enough. Maybe they didn't go through a real conversion. Who was their rabbi? So I always say, if you worry that you don't belong, you probably already do. There is no Jew I haven't met that doesn't suffer a little bit of an imposter syndrome about what they know. But for converts, it's who they are. And that's really a big challenge.
In terms of creating ritual, I know there's a feeling, and it's not just amongst people who maybe have gone through the conversion process, but I think even Jews sometimes feel, that they're worried about getting a ritual wrong. How do you respond to that concern?
Oh, that's so interesting. And people ask this all the time, right? And their fear of getting it wrong blocks their participation. And that's the really sad part, or blocks their active participation, right? They sit in the way back of services because they don't want to be seen not knowing the page, or they choose not to read at the Passover Seder their first year, or they don't want to bring, their recipe or a dish because it might be wrong, or, so instead they end up, bringing flowers. We deal with it in a few ways. One, we tell people identity and doing ritual is an ever-evolving organic process. So even if someone is converting with us and has gone through the year of study and the year of practice, that's really only 10% of the identity. The other 90% is becoming Jewish over time and for the rest of their life. And there's no right or wrong way to be Jewish. So I like to point out there's no two identical Jewish families. They may say they're doing it the same, but we know nobody's quite doing it exactly the same. Number two, I tell them that intention matters more than perfection. So you bring a dish, and you hope that instead of offending the host says, thank you so much for going out of your way to make something. Being that I can't serve it here, I'm going to put it over here. We're going to enjoy this as a meal tomorrow, or whatever it is. I hope all Jews sort of share that compassion, right, for someone who's new in our community. And I also think doing something imperfectly is more Jewish than doing nothing. So I'd rather have my students pronounce the wrong blessing for something, but have the right intention. And by the way, this just happened at a baby naming this past weekend. Everyone in the room was Jewish. Everyone in the room was born Jewish. And when I asked the parents to say, the blessing for the healthy, the birth of a child, they immediately recited the candle blessing for Friday night, right? And so, I made a joke. I said, look, we get, your intention. That also shows us Shabbat is very prevalent in your house. So I'd rather them say the quote unquote wrong blessing than the exact perfect one. We all had a good laugh. And I wish there had been a convert in the room to see that we all quote unquote mess up too. So we try to give a lot of, sort of lenient permissions.
Part of the job of, I think, sharing our love of ritual, and particularly your role as a rabbi and as an educator, is to help people feel like, okay, however you're doing it, like, as you said, you are included, you are accepted. And as long as you are feeling connected and the experience is meaningful, who cares if it's perfect?
That's exactly right. And sometimes it just takes giving a lot of compassionate permission, having a wonderful sense of humor about it. And, I don't like perfection in any area of my life, and I certainly don't like the pressure of it in Judaism. So I will go out of my way to invite as many people, to my home as possible in their process so they can see, it's not about perfection and performance. It's just about participating. I mean, that's really like the magic of what we're talking about. There's such a spectrum of ritual in Judaism that people can find different on-ramps, right? Nobody in our program is allowed to say, well, I don't want to do any ritual. I'm like a cultural Jew. To which I answer, well, you sitting, listening to Jewish music, eating your bagel and lox, don't look now, that's a ritual, right? Just as much as the Jews who say, well, I'm religious and I pray 3 times a day and I go to synagogue and I do this. It's all Judaism, Debs. It's all Judaism.
I'm thinking a lot, Rabbi Rubin, as you're talking about how many of our listeners are grandparents. I was just with my grandchildren. We were traveling, and I noticed that the daffodils were coming through the earth. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, here's our opportunity to say Shehechianu. Like, let's make notice of this moment, this awesomeness. Beautiful. That we have this cycle in our world of spring. And it was an opportunity for me as a grandparent to transmit the joy of recognizing nature through the Shehechianu, through that prayer.
Well, that's exactly right. And, we hope everybody has this awe of spring and things coming back to life, and everyone's going to relate to it differently. And what you did so beautifully there was say, hey, in Judaism, there's an actual prayer that we say to, for this. And that's organic education, right? They're not sitting in services. They don't have a textbook in front of them. Someone they love, their grandmother, is saying, look at the beauty of the earth. Like, Jews have a special relationship to the rhythms of the earth, and we get to say a special prayer when something happens for the first time. I mean, that's lovely, and that's exactly it. I would say bingo, and we need more of that.
I would love to talk more about the rituals of conversion, but I think this idea of culminating a process of learning and also becoming a part of a people, it's so beautiful to me. And I think that there are ways that those of us who might have grown up with Judaism but want to reaffirm our Judaism in some ways or mark a process of becoming might learn from the rituals of conversion. So can you share in a little bit more detail what happens, both for you and then those who are experiencing that?
Sure. So mikvahs have been used for thousands of years in Judaism for all different purposes, like you'd say, of belonging. Mikvah is one of the only rituals in Judaism that creates a binary. You're one thing before you go in, and you're one thing after you emerge from going in. Most identity or things in Judaism evolve, but the mikvah creates a before and after. So we use mikvah not only for conversion, you're not Jewish when you go in, you're Jewish when you come out, but we use mikvah for all different things. Today, before a wedding, you are not married, you are about to get married, or divorce when you need a before or after, or illness when you need a before or after, or moving, or graduate school, or any transition moment. A mikvah is any natural body of water that is connected to the cycle of the earth, any river, lake, stream, creek, as long as the water is flowing, there's an inlet and an outlet. Why? We want those waters to be old waters and new waters. They're never created or destroyed. They're part of the earth's cycle. They evaporate, they rain back down, they evaporate, again. And in ancient times, the mikvahs at the base of the temples just caught, rainwater. And so that rainwater is the same water that we think is the rainwater now and was the rainwater at the beginning of creation. In Genesis 1:1, it says, the earth is unformed and void, but God sweeps over the waters of the deep. So water is the life-giving element at the beginning of creation and is still the life-giving element. We love when it rains on a day of conversion because that's just like such a smart, easy link to this little speech. But in Manhattan, especially when the weather is freezing like it is now, we use a beautiful indoor mikveh where rainwater is collected on the roof. Instead of being brought down into the building for plumbing and hand washing or drinking, it fills pools and it's minimally heated and treated and people can, immerse. It is a total sensory deprivation ritual. Some rituals you may be able to phone in and kind of go through a little out of it. When you're immersed in water, completely underneath that water, something transformative is happening. Judaism is not the only tradition, a religious tradition, to use water to connote change and transformation, but there are resonances that water has had with the Israelites. After that story of creation, the world is going to be reset by the great flood in Noah's generation. God will use water to reset humanity. Then our ancestors will have their romantic moments meeting at wells of water. That ritual gave way, right, to us descendants. And of course, for Passover, we will celebrate the great, change in human history where the Jews will go from slavery to freedom through none other than a body of water. So those particular resonances have given us permission to use water as the great change agent. And when people are in the water, Eileen, whether it's for conversion or it's, I've been in so many times before each baby was born or before a wedding, whenever you're in the water, you're creating a rebirth for yourself. You are mirroring and echoing a fetus in the womb, a baby completely suspended in water. So the rabbis say, how else to create a rebirth, spiritual or not? You go into that water and you ball up, you lift your feet up, you duck your head down, and you are immersed and floating in a rebirth that you have decided. I'm going to be born now into a life where I can foresee being a mother or a wife, or I can just foresee being pure for Shabbat or whatever it is. I can go, to law school. I wish that more people use the mikveh. I use it for conversion, as I said, weekly here in New York, but anytime a congregant comes in and they're in the, on the precipice of a transition, I say, let's create a before and after for you. Ritual works. It's very powerful. I was teaching Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel last night in class. What does Heschel say? Ritual is the great, architecture of time. Create the before and the after. Create the time for rest. It's all about us having the agency and power over time.
Is there any other Jewish ritual that you feel could really, if you were to inspire your students or your congregants to have the permission to make it their own, or as a rabbi, you would love to help them refresh? What is that ritual?
I think there are two, and we've touched on them a little bit, so I'm going to bring it home. I think counting of the Omer could be incredible. Mm-hmm. I think just what Deb says, you could study every day. You could say a prayer every day. You could have one act of kindness every day and really become more connected to the Shavuot story and to the agricultural cycle of 49 days that barley, takes to become wheat. I think that is just so cool. And I wish, more people did it. Again, I think it's a PR issue. I think if they knew about it, they would do it. And mikvah, I don't think mikvah itself needs a refresh. I think the framing of it needs a refresh because people think of mikvah as before Shabbat or conversion, but there's so much more. And what if the first time we're in an ocean every summer, we think about our swimming as a mikvah immersion, and we thank God, for these waters that are still on the earth. I mean, there is so much potential there just to be, aware, and nothing is more, again, refreshing and sensory deprivation than, being underneath water and marveling at God's earth and how we get to be a part of it. I would love to see mikvah come back. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been in the work of conversion, to be honest, because I started the Center for Exploring Judaism about a week after I got married. Then I was pregnant immediately. So as the center grew, my own family grew. And because mikvah was going to be a part of the center from the beginning, I thought, well, I got to try these on for size. And so that's when I started going to mikvah as regularly as I could. And I have found it to be so powerful and so connecting and so joyous that I wish more people used the mikvah.
Rabbi Rubin, what a wonderful afternoon we've spent with you. I know that others will treasure your wisdom, your experience, and hopefully be inspired by your many words. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you for hosting me and thank you for thinking of me and just promise me that you'll have me back at some point. This was so much fun.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
I just loved this conversation with Rabbi Lisa Rubin. She reminds me of the coach that you want in your corner, whether you are playing sports or you are studying for a test and she's making sure that you're going to do your best. And she just builds so much confidence and she really tries to get you to just get out of your head. I don't know. I was thinking about this funny story. My husband and I took a birthing class before I was preparing to deliver my son. And they said, if your wife is in labor and she says, I can't do it anymore, don't say, yes, you can. Say, well, you're already doing it. Too late. Maybe not too late, but you think you can't do it, but you're already doing it. Look at you go. You're questioning yourself too much. You're doing great. You're already the hero. Don't think about what you're going to do. Don't say you can do it. Say it's already happening and you're already the hero. You're already doing an amazing job.
Well, that was definitely our story when we gave birth. I was in labor when my husband fainted in the birthing room. Everybody went to him. And by the time they got back to me, they're like, forget the epidural. You're already too far along. So I was...
Oh, geez.
Right. I was already doing it.
That was like my worst case scenario of a birth story. They were like, what's your birth plan or preference? I said, we both come out alive. I'm not traumatized and I get an epidural. I don't know in which order. And as long as those three things happen, which they did, I had a positive birth experience.
Rabbi Rubin talks a lot about how practice leads to study and understanding, and this makes so much sense to me. It's an invitation to trust the process of meaning-making rather than waiting until everything feels clear before beginning to act. There's a foundational Jewish phrase from the Torah, Na'aseh v'nishma. It's from Exodus 24:7, and it's usually translated as, we shall do and then we shall hear or understand. And I think of it as what Rabbi Rubin describes. You act first and then you find the meaning. Many contemporary rituals emerge precisely at moments when our language fails us. Becoming a grandparent, or grief, or divorce, healing, aging, transition, reconciliation, joy, uncertainty. We often don't fully understand what we feel until we move our bodies through an act. You often talk about this embodiment. It's lighting the candles, entering the water, speaking the names of those who came before us. So we don't wait until we fully understand the threshold before we cross it. So we embody it, and through ritual, we begin to hear what the moment is asking of us. And Eileen, I think this can be especially powerful because many people feel disconnected from an inherited ritual language, yet they still long for meaning and grounding and transformation. Na'aseh v'nishma offers permission to begin imperfectly, as Rabbi Rubin suggests. So we should try a ritual before feeling religious enough, or we should try a ritual to participate before certainty. We should try a ritual to discover meaning through practice, rather than feeling that we have to master it. It reframes ritual not as a performance, but as an encounter. I also see ritual as an act of courageous participation. Mikvah is one of those rituals that we discover the meaning of after we try it. We literally step into the water before we know exactly who we will become on the other side. The Jewish Grandparent Network collaborated with Mayim Chayim on a water ceremony for new grandparents. That ceremony can be found on the Jewish Grandparents Network website. You can imagine that the water metaphors of grandparents having a ripple effect through the generations is something that the ceremony speaks to. And one of the things I really do like is that the ceremony ends with using the water in the bowl to nourish plants around the house. You get it. The first time that I enjoyed mikvah was with my daughter, who was a new bride. I went to the mikvah at the Soul Center in Baltimore. They partnered with Mayim Chayim on the language that one can use during the ritual, which I will tell you really helps because it's sometimes hard to find the words to match the emotions that you're feeling. I used to think that mikvah was for people going through a conversion to Judaism or just for Orthodox women following their menstrual cycles, but now I know better. Mikvah is for anyone going through a transition. Check out our guidebook on the Recustom website for further instructions on a prayer for the mother of the bride and to get links to the Mayim Chayim website, where you'll find prayers for anyone who is leaving behind a part of themselves and moving towards something else. As the mother of the bride, it created this space for me to think about my daughter's new role and how it also meant my role would change. Taking a breath between the busyness of preparing for the wedding and the wedding itself, I recognized the shift in the relationship with my daughter, who was creating a family of her own. Hey, it was the first time since giving birth that I was going to have a new son, so this was a big deal. The mikvah ceremony provided the pause and the language to help me process the changes that we were going through as a family and that I was going through and becoming a new mother-in-law. Or as I like to say, a mother in love. I jumped in as a mother and I emerged much more than that. So do as Rabbi Rubin suggests, Na'aseh v'nishma, try it, it might be just what you needed.
This first season of Regeneration is a 10-episode journey. We invite you to join us every Friday to explore new ideas for Jewish ritual, hear from an inspiring guest, and receive tips to practice on your own. You can visit us at recustom.com/regeneration to download all of your guidebooks, see the episode list, and sign up for our newsletter so you stay up to date on everything happening with Regeneration.
Regeneration is a partnership between ReCustom and the Jewish Grandparents Network,
and is hosted by Eileen Levinson and Deborah Weinberg, and produced by Josh Gilbert and Kate Mishkin.
Follow the Regeneration podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week. See you then.